Nobody saw it coming. Not the tennis world, not the fans, and honestly, not even her. A 20-year-old from the Philippines suddenly found herself at the center of a moment that had nothing to do with trophies, rankings, or prize money. And yet, for millions watching around the world, it meant far more than any of those things ever could. Because sometimes the moments that hit the hardest aren't the ones you train for. They're the ones that find you quietly, completely, when you least expect them to. This is one of those moments. And if you think you already know this story, stay with me, because the part that sent the internet into a frenzy hasn't even begun yet. To truly understand what happened, you have to go back, not to a major tournament or a career milestone, but to a 13-year-old girl standing in Quezon City, Philippines, with a packed bag and a life-changing decision ahead of her. At an age when most kids are still figuring out where they belong, she was boarding a plane to Mallorca, Spain, her destination, one of the most demanding tennis academies in the world. Think about that for a second. She left behind her language, her food, the familiar streets of home, and the everyday comfort of family, all to chase something her country had never really seen before. Because in the Philippines, tennis wasn't the dream. Basketball ruled. Boxing inspired. Tennis was something you stumbled upon on a quiet afternoon. But she wasn't chasing what already existed. She was chasing what didn't. And somehow, she made it real. She climbed all the way to world number 2 in the junior rankings, something almost unimaginable for someone coming from where she started. But what happened next had nothing to do with rankings, scorelines, or 4 hands down the line. It had everything to do with something much bigger. Before she even stepped onto the court in Miami, before the first serve was struck or the crowd settled into their seats, a moment unfolded that no one could have scripted. It wasn't part of the tournament. It wasn't on the schedule. And yet, it became the moment everyone would remember. Because standing there wasn't just a rising tennis star. It was a young woman who had carried the quiet hopes of a nation for years, often alone, often far from home. And then, in a space where sport usually speaks the loudest, something else took over. Recognition, connection, pride. 2 Filipino icons from completely different worlds crossed paths in a way that instantly transcended the game itself. No racket, no ball, no scoreboard. Just a moment, the kind that reminds you why journeys like hers matter in the first place. Because this was never just about tennis. It was about what happens when someone dares to go first, and in doing so, makes millions feel seen. When that moment finally unfolded, the reaction wasn't just applause. It was something deeper, something that felt like history, quiet, powerful, and impossible to ignore. Nobody asked for it. There was no obligation, no headline being chased, no requirement from the tournament. Just a decision to recognize something real. And that's exactly why it hit so hard. In a sports world that moves fast and forgets even faster, everything slowed down, just long enough to tell a story that mattered. Not just her story, their story. A 13-year-old who left Quezon City chasing something invisible. A coach who built a championship legacy, while quietly carrying his Filipino identity through a league where it's rarely spotlighted. 2 completely different paths, intersecting again years later in the same city where everything first aligned. And when the tribute played, it wasn't just highlights. It was context, sacrifice. The in-between years nobody claps for, the losses, the doubt, the long stretches where belief is the only thing keeping you going. You could see it in their body language when they met again. This wasn't fan meets idol. This was peer meets peer. Respect meets respect. And that's the moment the internet lost it. Because people didn't just see 2 successful Filipinos. They saw representation, loud, undeniable, and global. They saw what happens when someone breaks through, and someone who's already there reaches back and says, "I see you." And maybe the most powerful part? There was no speech. No grand declaration. Just a shared understanding that didn't need words. In a stadium built for noise, the moment went viral because of how quiet and how real it felt. Somewhere between that first meeting and this reunion, the story stopped being about potential. It became proof. Then came another shift, one no one expected. Her bio read, "Things you didn't see on TV." And just like that, everything clicked. For years, people had only seen one version of her. The competitor, the composed post-match speaker, the rising name climbing through the rankings. But this was different. This was her world unfiltered. Early practice clips. Quiet, behind-the-scenes moments. The spaces between the spotlight that never make it to broadcasts or highlight reels. No production team. No script. Just her. And fans didn't just follow, they flooded in. Because this wasn't about content. It was about access. It was about finally seeing the human side of someone they had watched from a distance. The same girl who once stood nervously in Quezon City was now casually setting up her phone between training sessions, letting the world in, one clip at a time. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect. On one side, a powerful, cinematic moment of recognition at the highest level. On the other, something quieter, but just as impactful. Control of her own narrative. For the first time, she wasn't just being talked about. She was doing the talking. And that subtle shift sent fans into a completely different kind of frenzy. Not the loud explosion of a viral moment, but something steadier. Something that lasts longer. Connection. Because now, whether she's stepping onto a court or sharing a glimpse of practice, it feels like people aren't just watching her journey anymore. They're part of it. She spoke about how happy she was that Filipinos were finally being exposed to tennis. That sport, at its core, is a bridge. A bridge between worlds. Between people who had never picked up a racket and a game that suddenly felt like it belonged to them too. And that's what makes her different. This was never just about winning matches. It was about shifting perspective. In a country where basketball courts outnumber tennis courts, where icons are built in boxing rings and hardwood arenas, she didn't just break through, she expanded what was possible. She made tennis visible, accessible, real. And you could feel that impact in the way people talked about her, not just as a player, but as theirs. Her journey didn't feel distant or untouchable. It felt shared. So when she said sport was a bridge, it didn't sound like a cliché. It sounded like truth, lived, earned, undeniable. Because somewhere along the way, without forcing it, without branding it, she became that bridge. Between the Philippines and the global stage. Between tradition and something entirely new. Between watching and believing you could be next. And maybe that's why moments like Miami hit so differently. Why a simple meeting became emotional. Why a social media debut turned into a cultural moment. Why a practice video felt as meaningful as a match win. Because people aren't just following a career anymore. They're watching a shift, a quiet, powerful rewriting of what representation in global sport can look like. And the most remarkable part? She's still in the middle of it. Still building. Still evolving. Still carrying something far bigger than herself, without ever making it feel heavy. Which means the story everyone's talking about right now isn't the peak. It's just the point where the rest of the world finally caught up.